Washington Capitals forward Tom Wilson is facing a long suspension for boarding. I think we have another suspension coming as well based on actions happened today. And we're taking a look at some NHL trade rumors, mainly focused on the Buffalo Sabres, who are apparently wide open for business. We'll discuss all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now before we jump into this trade talk around the Sabres, I want to take a look at some suspension news. Of course, we had news announced late last night that Tom Wilson was suspended indeed by the NHL for the boarding call that was not called on the ice against the Boston Bruins against Brandon Carlo, and he was handed a 7-game suspension. Now I know there's a difference of opinion out there right now on if it was too little, too much, or if it was even a bad call at all and it shouldn't have been a penalty. I know there's some Capitals fans that seem to be on that side of the fence. I've heard comments from Alex Ovechkin, which I don't expect him to say much different. I mean, you know what? I expect the Capitals to defend their player, and I think most NHL teams would likely do that. But there's also some that feel out there that Tom Wilson has not learned after all these years and numerous fines and suspensions. I believe this is his 5th suspension, if I am correct on that. I believe that's what it is, it's a 5, and he's been fined multiple times, 2 times as well. So he hasn't learned. You know, there's times that people feel like Tom Wilson can just not pass up that opportunity to be the predator and just ram people's heads either into his shoulder, into the glass, or whatever. And it's just a bad scenario. I mean, Brandon Carlo is starting to feel better, but still, this is a scenario that the severity of the hit and the injury is really what drove home the suspension here. Now, due to the 7 games missed due to suspension, Tom Wilson will be forfeiting just a little bit over $300,000 in income. If he would have been deemed a repeat offender based on the fact that he's actually been able to stay clean for a long enough period of time, he would have actually forfeited over double that amount. It would have been well over $600,000 that he would have lost in income due to the suspension. So certainly it is what it is. That's their call. I'm a little bit surprised, to be honest, that it wasn't a little bit more. I was honestly thinking that it could go up around 9 or 10. We've also got confirmation from numerous NHL reporters that Tom Wilson is not going to appeal the suspension. He has the opportunity to go to Commissioner Gary Bettman and ask for it to be reduced. And then even depending on that outcome, he can also request it then to go to a third-party arbitrator as well. So there's options for players to not agree with the suspension and to fight it, but apparently he's not going to be doing that. So we'll see. Now, in other action today, during the Chicago Blackhawks Tampa Bay Lightning game, there was a bad hit, in my opinion, from Connor Murphy of the Blackhawks on Blake Coleman, I believe it was, of the Lightning. He was given a game misconduct penalty and kicked out of the game. So the fact that he was given a major will play a role in the decision here, but I do fully suspect NHL player safety to be taking a look at that. That was a clear illegal headshot, in my opinion, and I do expect there to be some disciplinary action. Now, I'm not sure it's going to be anywhere near what Tom Wilson got. Obviously, this is not the history that Wilson did, but I do think Connor Murphy is likely going to be facing at least a couple of game suspension here coming soon, and we'll probably find out either tonight or tomorrow morning if indeed they're going to be reviewing that any further than just the penalty called on the ice. Now on to the Buffalo Sabres. On Saturday headlines last night, Elliot Friedman of Hockey Night in Canada and Sportsnet reported that the Sabres are wide open for business. Now, of course, we're not surprised to hear that the Sabres are looking to make some trades. That really should not shock anybody. After today's loss, they find themselves, I believe they're at the actual basement of the league. I have to double check the standings. I know they were in the bottom 3 with Detroit and Ottawa, and I think today's loss drops their winning percentage down to go down to 31st. In their last 14 games, they're 2-11-1. Can anybody tell me how Ralph Krueger still has a job? We've seen plenty of other coaches, including a couple recently, between Calgary and Montreal, be relieved of their duties with far better results in this case. Like the Sabres are, when you watch them, you just don't even feel like they're really putting everything they have out there. They're not, the effort doesn't seem to be there to the way it should be. You know, some teams you get that feeling that they're really playing for each other and they're trying to pull together and accomplish something, and you just don't get that sense when you watch Buffalo play. So you know what, I have a hard time to understand how Kruger still has a job. I feel like he's lost interest of that team. The systems he's putting in place for how that team is built just don't seem to be working. So I'm a little confused on why he hasn't been let go, and I would be amazed if he lasts much longer. But that aside, Kevyn Adams has a very busy job ahead of him here. He did indicate during his press conference recently that they're certainly open to make some changes, but he didn't really go into a lot of detail. During that press conference, Adams did not give the coaching staff a vote of confidence either. So obviously, based on what Friedman's saying, it kind of all makes sense. But what's based on what Elliot Friedman's saying, though, is that I don't really think there's anybody on this team that would be considered an untouchable, and that includes Jack Eichel and Rasmus Dahlin. Now, I don't think they're really going to be pushing to trade Eichel or Dahlin. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying here is that if a team calls, they're going to listen on everybody and see what the package would come back and make a decision. But at the end of the day, it's going to take a lot to pry Eichel or Dahlin out of that organization. Those are the two players they would like to hope to build around. And I'm sure that the Sabres ownership and Adams are just hoping that they don't get a request from Eichel to be traded, because clearly he's their biggest asset and the guy they've been wanting to build around for the last 5 years since he's been a Buffalo Sabre, and they've made no progress to go nowhere near the playoffs, and I can understand why frustration is mounting big time on his part. But taking a look at several other options for them to trade, we have a few of them that are pending UFAs, pending RFAs, and really everything and anything is on the board. I mean, you've got Eric Stahl, a pending unrestricted free agent. They brought in to kind of solidify the center ice position a bit behind Jack Eichel. Hasn't really worked out the best. He hasn't been terrible either, but still like a situation where a team could pick him up with all his experience for a rental. I mean, I do not expect Eric Stahl to be returning to Buffalo next year. He's a UFA. Like I said, he was kind of surprised to be traded from Minnesota. He was quite content and happy there after signing a multi-year deal. So I don't expect Eric Stahl to re-sign in Buffalo at all. I mean, I don't know what his future holds, to be completely honest, but a team to pick him up could make a lot of sense. He does have a 10-team no-trade list, though, so I don't know exactly what teams he'd have on his list that he would want to block, but still, it can make a lot of sense that he be moved. You get Brandon Montour making under $4 million, 26 years old. They did give up a lot to the Ducks, including a first-round pick, to make that acquisition, and that's a trade that just never worked out. You know Brandon Montour is getting out of Buffalo as soon as possible. He's not going to be resigning there as well. Has not worked under Ralph Kruger's system, and he's definitely heading to greener pastures this offseason. So for a team to bulk up on the blue line, for a guy like Montour, they're never going to get back what they paid for him, because his stats have really dipped since he's been there. But certainly another player I fully suspect to be traded, given the situation with his contract, for sure. So those two guys, pending UFAs. If another team wanted to inquire on getting Carter Hutton, who's a pending UFA, 35-year-old goaltender who really has never gotten the job done ever since they signed him, then that's an option as well. I don't think they'd have any qualms of moving Hutton, but I don't really know there's going to be a lot of interest there. But we do know the Capitals are looking for a veteran guy to come in as well. That's been rumored, but we'll see how that goes. But I mean, Carter Hutton, ever since he came over as a free agency after leaving the Blues back 3 or 4 years ago, that's never worked out. He was a great backup, a guy who could be a 1A, even 1B situation, but never worked out as a starter. And now they're ready to move on between Johansson and Allmark and Ukko-Pekka-Laukkonen in their future, I guess, is what they're looking at right now. But still, those guys are all pending UFAs. Makes sense that they would be on the move because they're not coming back. Now, when it comes to some pending RFAs, though, some interesting names are in that list. You've got Casey Middlestat, 22 years old, completing his first contract. His rookie contract's almost up. He's a guy, in my opinion, that's never found that success that it was ever expected of him when he was drafted. He was drafted with a lot of skill, a lot of high hopes. He had a wicked World Junior tournament after being drafted, and his I guess you could say his hopes were skyrocketed from there. What they were hoping he would be. But in my opinion, he did 1 year college hockey, and they rushed him to the NHL. They should have never brought him to the NHL. Casey Middlestat, when he first got there, was clearly not ready. He's just starting to look like maybe he'd be ready a little bit now. But even then, it looks like he's going to be a winger, not a center. And you know what? He was rushed, and they really botched his development, in my opinion. And maybe a fresh start, some new scenery with some new coaching, a different development path might be the best thing ever for him. I mean, certainly you can't get much worse. I mean, he's at a situation now where he's got like 3 or 4 points in 7 games, starting to play a little bit more finally. He was on the taxi squad a lot this year. Kruger's finally been starting to get him more into the lineup though lately, and he's done better and better. So we'll see, but it's certainly another player as well that teams could be calling on if they want to try to revisit getting that full potential out of him that he was drafted with. I mean, another guy, he's so young that there's still a lot of chance there to maybe get that opportunity to get that done. You've got Sam Reinhart as well, who's, again, a pending RFA. He'll be an RFA for the last time. After this, he'll be into his UFA years. Sam Reinhart's been a really good player for Buffalo. He's been productive. He's not your main star to build around, but he's an excellent secondary piece and a guy with a lot of teams who could be a part of a reasonably young core. I mean, he's 26 years old, so he's not in his younger years. He's kind of at a point where he's right around his prime years. Usually the mid to late 20s is when NHL players kind of start to peak and get their best performance. So for some teams, you know, it's a good acquisition. Now, it's going to take more to get Reinhart out of Buffalo than many of those other pieces. Outside of Eichel and maybe Taylor Hall, he's their best trade chip. And really, to be honest, I think he probably might even get a better haul than Taylor Hall, given the fact that he's younger, he's been more productive lately, and if they can get him to agree to an extension, especially with the next team, then that would be way more valuable than Taylor Hall as a rental, in my opinion. He's a former 65-point player. He's got 17 points in 20 games this year. He's one of the few guys scoring for this team, leading the team in goals with 9. He has more goals right now than Jack Eichel, Taylor Hall, and Jeff Skinner combined. And that's only 9, which is great. It's a good result, but it's not phenomenal. And he still has more than those 3 guys combined, which is quite sad when you think about it, and certainly very frustrating for the Buffalo Sabres. So if they're willing to listen on Reinhart, like I said, that doesn't really mean there's any untouchables on this team. And I think a lot of teams would be interested in a guy like him. He can play center. He can play wing. I don't know what kind of a package you'd have to give up to get Reinhart, but when you start trading guys like that are in their prime years, it's hard to win those deals. So they're going to have to tread carefully. But if they get somebody offering up like a first-round pick and maybe another young player or something, they need to listen and see if they can make this team better for sure. I mean, that leads us to another pending UFA in Taylor Hall, who's certainly had his struggles. We saw today in today's game, which was typical Sabres. It's just, you know, the way the year has gone when it seems like nothing can go right. Taylor Hall had a breakaway, and he tripped himself basically on the blue line and went down and lost the chance. But he was already on the ice for a long period of time. It was clearly out of gas. I mean, I'm not really trying to pick on Taylor Hall. I'm just saying, like, when things just don't go right and nothing will go right. And that's just a prime example of how they just seem to get all the bad luck this year, along with, you know, on top of that, lack of effort too, in my opinion, and just not as great a team on paper as many people thought they would be. I have to think a couple more of their defensemen who have 1 more year left on their contracts might be attracted to some teams. You got Colin Miller, at 3.875. We've got 1 more year after this one. Right shot defenseman. He's not the greatest defensively. I've seen some really bad defensive play recently, but offensively, he can be decent on the power play. He's got a good shot. So for some teams as a depth player, especially if Buffalo would take back a little salary even, that's not a bad deal. I mean, you've heard trade rumors forever and a day about Rasmus Ristolainen. Would they maybe finally pull a deal off for him? He's down to 1 more year on his contract, making just over $5 million. So he's another guy like Reinhart in that mid-20 range now, that they're kind of at their mid-level. You know, they're kind of at that prime years. Teams are willing to give up decent amounts for that, I would think. And there's lots of teams out there that need, whether it be wing help, center help, you know, defense help. Like, the Sabres could really be a team that's really, really busy here over the next couple of months leading into the NHL trade deadline, and then further beyond that into the offseason. Even if they only trade all their pending UFAs now, they could certainly be looking to continue the tear down and rebuild into the offseason as well, when we get into the other guys like Reinhart and possibly Jack Eichel or anybody else that's under contract for a longer period of time. So clearly many of these Sabres players will not be Sabres for too much longer. Like I said, a lot of them are on expiring contracts. I expect Kevin Adams to be busy really busy here in the next little while. I can't believe Kruger still has a job, so it's a matter of time before he's relieved of his duties. Maybe they let him finish out the season. I don't know. It can't get much worse, can it? I mean, really, this rebuild has been going on for a decade in Buffalo. When are they finally going to get things back on the up and up here to get this team moving forward? I feel terrible for Sabres fans. Buffalo is a great sports and hockey community, and they deserve better than this. So I hope they can get things back on track here and finally get this team heading in the right direction. So give me your mock trades on many of these Sabres players you expect to be moved, and we'll discuss further down in the comments. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.